It's a lot of sort of prajna energy. When I first learned about compassion from one of my Buddhist teachers, they spoke about, the quality of holding and presence and kindness that we often think about with compassion, but also this cutting through of illusions energy, what they call the sort of prajna, to say that that is also a part of compassion. And sometimes we can have a difficult time with that because our narratives can be so precious. And I think that's why Brooke used the word innocent before, because it softens it. We can realize that at no point did this Vanessa Scotto who's sitting here say, you know what I want to do? I want to give myself this neurological condition and I want to be, self-sacrificing, right? So it was more that what you call the ego mind, or sometimes we call it the ego defense structure, at some point thought that was the most adaptive way it could show up and engage in life when the circumstances were different than they are right now. And I think it's wonderful that you're bringing the truth in. I think what's hard is sometimes we don't have the compassionate energy for ourselves, and the narratives we hold kick in again. So if we were always bad, the moment we hear the truth, instead of sitting with it and allowing it to blow our minds open and kind of shake things loose, we can go right back into that narrative loop. So I think it's worth us talking about the personalization of suffering, because several times in your book, you brought in, what we may think of as psychological, for example. It could be the global coherence. It could be astrology. It could be intergenerational trauma. And we have a way of concretizing it by calling it my depression, my suffering, my pain. And that, in a way, that can be to our detriment. So can we talk a little bit about how we're personalizing suffering and how that can be problematic? And then, of course, why you think gratitude may soften all of that.
Yeah, for sure. And I love the invitation to be clear in that distinction that sometimes a cuddle and a listening ear might be the most intelligent, loving response. And sometimes a slap around the face and a pointing out the nonsense of what you're saying might be the most loving and compassionate response. I think culturally and personally, we're more inclined to give a cuddle. Mm-hmm. And that's better than just saying, toughen up.
Sure, because we want to be good people. It's easier to identify
as a good person identity
if you're being nice.
Yeah.
That's so nice.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, that only lasts so long, right? Until yes. to how appalling we are as people. Like, what a shit I am. How petty-minded. And yeah. I'm sure there's an acronym for nice there that what it really points to. So in terms of gratitude and how that can open up the personalizing, so it feels interesting to touch on that because I can relate to that in my own experience with depression as an experience. This is kind of my interest. Like, what is depression? Like, I know how I experience it. Like, I can talk about the energetics, that some of the thoughts that happen, how it feels in the body, and so on. And I assume there's correlating brain chemistry, because of course there's correlating brain chemistry for any experience, whether it's causative or vice versa, who could say. When I then, just in that curiosity, there's not a great deal of suffering. It took a lot of suffering to get to that point of curiosity to realize that, but just in the awareness of heaviness in chest, thought of not wanting to be alive, or thought of my being bad, or thought of me being unworthy or bad, terrible in some way. If I can just be with that, the experience is fairly neutral. But then I hear about this thing called depression. And this is when you actually have a faulty brain chemistry. So now I'm not only am I feeling shit, but I have a mechanistic material cause for that shitness with no immediate resolution. I mean, well, there are immediate resolutions, but they're generally not very effective. So what would happen if that depression arises and I'm in a different realm or reality? I'm really liking this sort of invitation to not talk about different realms, and now I'm being a very, very irresponsible, badly behaved human being.
It's good. She was egging you on, I think, ultimately.
Okay.
So it's perfect.
Just a little.
Right. I mean, yeah. If we can't go left field into profound topics in this sort of conversation, then I don't know where we can.
Yes, right. This is the place.
In this realm, we have a more evolved and intelligent, evidence-based way of interacting with emotional experience. And so now I'm being given data. I'm being given information that's telling me that something is not quite as it could be, or is it, I'm very hesitant to use the word should, but there's this basically this question mark being introduced. If I put my hand on the hot plate, I start to get a lot of data coming into my brain that tells me I need to do something, like stop holding that hot plate. And of course it works because of its intensity of pain. It's okay, I've dropped the plate before I even thought about it. If I'm able to bring a similar awareness to what this data is telling me, it may be something as simple as that, to drop the plate. Like, stop believing that you're going to end your life one day. So I'm talking to myself. Just quit that. You've never done it. You're never going to do it. And you're not the only person on this planet that feels a little bit out of place. And is deeply curious as to the peace that may be imbued in returning to the spirit world, but not yet. So just, for example, quit that thought. Or it might be, yeah, well, you haven't exercised for 2 weeks. Or you haven't practiced gratitude for months because you wrote a book about it and you think you know something about it. So what are the basics? What is helpful now? And where I get excited with gratitude, and where I feel there is something a little bit different or distinct, and certainly not Pollyanna-ish coming in with radical gratitude, is what happens when I actually turn and face that which I have characterized as depression, and I say thank you. And I notice as I ask that, my emotional body gives a response which is just this extraordinary relief. This extraordinary relief. So now that heaviness or that pain or that fear is not being made bad, but is being given appreciation. It's that moment where we stop pushing away the kid from our leg, from our trouser legs, and we actually say, sweetheart, what do you need? Okay, you just want my attention, 100% of it right now. No problem. Except, of course, it is a problem because that's not how our parents treated us, and so that's not how we've learned how to parent others, let alone parent our own inner experience, which is just a really a sort of progressive conversation that's happening now. So that's an invitation. I know the answer to that question from my own experience. I know what it looks like to try and escape my depression for 10, 15 years using socially unacceptable and then socially acceptable forms of distraction and escape. And I know what it looks like when finally I surrendered to my pain. And I said with great sincerity, thank you. So that is the blind spot, is it not? And that is how we would greet the despair if we knew in the moment of the despair that this was just joy warming up.
Makes a big difference to have that
Right.
awareness. Yeah.
Right. I mean, all the difference in the world. I mean, I'm sort of imagining having that conversation with despair, like, okay, despair, I get that you're here as some sort of like dualistic play that's going to evoke joy, and that's a bit weird, by the way. Like, I don't know why you just couldn't come along with joy in the first place, but like, I get that's how we're wired, so no problem. I'll grin and bear it, you know. Like on the roller coaster, we know it's going to stop. We know it's going to stop, which is usually what allows us to let go and scream or.
Yeah, that's right.
Enjoy the experience, right? And I think deeply we do know that this experience is going to stop. This form of this experience. You know, this goes on and on, right? I mean, there's the great voiding of the get out clause. There's no getting out.
Yeah. I remember when that one landed, it first felt like a huge bummer for a while. And then eventually it was like, oh, it's just like you were saying. I'm on a roller coaster ride. And this one will end, I'll get on a different roller coaster. And then I'll hopefully be able to throw my arms up and scream and enjoy that roller coaster. Yeah.
I think depending on what you're going through, it's easier or harder to say thank you. You know, so if there's some part of myself, I don't know, maybe I'm frustrated or annoyed, and I can see, it's like an unmet wound or an inner child, and I can meet it with love. But for example, when people are suffering maybe with physical illness or just maybe their parent is sick or their child is sick, these types of things, it can feel challenging to say, thank you. You know, I'm glad you're here. What is my invitation that you're bringing into my life? And I think in part that's why practice is so important, because it's almost, Will, you gave a great example of when you were studying this kind of mixed martial art, there was this bridge pose you were trying to do, and your mind was telling you, I can't do this. I can't do anymore. I can't push past this limit. And yet your body did. And it kept going and it kept going. And you can see that we have these self-defeating voices built into this structure we could call the ego mind that make it appear to be harder than it is in reality. And it seems to me that the more we're practicing gratitude, the more we're building the awareness, the wisdom, and the muscles to know not to listen to those narratives and to keep pushing into experience and embodiment.
Yeah, for sure. I feel there's such an important message in that, an inconvenient truth, but a truth nonetheless, that we have just as much aerobic capacity or fitness capacity or strength or resilience as we have trained, you know. And so when I die, I will have as much awareness and presence and resilience as I've spent building up over the last 40 years. So I just hope it doesn't come at the end of a week-long journey into wine, because it might be that that's quite diminished or limited. And that's certainly a part of my practice right now, is to not drink alcohol, is to not have that input. But when it comes to meditation, a teacher of mine, Roshi Junpo Dennis Kelly, said to me, Will, we practice, we meditate, so that when shit happens, we're useful. Now, it would be nice if when shit happens, we could take a little pill and gain the benefits of 10,000 hours of meditation just like that. But of course, that's not how it works. And similarly, when we go down to start that 100-meter race, our hopes and possibilities in that race are dependent entirely upon how much I've practiced. Obviously, some other factors as well, but generally, if I'm a 100-meter runner, if I've got that basic skill and body to be in it, my chances in that race, large part, is how much I've practiced it physically and visually as well. Mm-hmm. So yes, the journey from the mental body to the emotional body, a very short path, very easy route once we've taken it.
Yeah.
But until then, you try telling the mental body to get out of itself. The mental body doesn't know what to do.
I have, yeah.
Right.
But I've only for decades, yeah.
Right. Well, I had people telling me that. They're like, you're too much in your head. And I'm like intellectually, I get that, but physically, I just don't. Like, I'm not feeling the truth of that until I did one day. And funnily enough, appropriately enough, I got that on an integrally informed Zen meditation retreat. So a lot of meditation, but also a lot of embodiment, subtle energy practice, so yoga and qigong, and also a lot of philosophical reindoctrination. So, for example, just that distinction that there is a way of speaking from the heart that is quite different from the head allowed me to explore that and discover the truth of that. Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I speak from here, I'm really, really different. It feels different for me. So that's, Zen is ancient, yet the recognition that we have emotions within Zen is very contemporary and very recent. So we have this ancient technology, which is brilliant. I personally, if you want to wake up, do Zen is my instruction. Sit down, shut up, and don't move. That's it, really. And there's a great humor in that. Of course, that's not everyone's path. And I would throw into that what we now know in 2019 about psychology, and what we now know also about the nervous system and the vagus nerve and so on, and trauma, and to put in the qigong or the yoga and or the philosophical reindoctrination, like what is meditation, why am I meditating, would be for me what looks like a truly integral practice that takes into account all dimensions and realms of the human consciousness.
Agree.
Yeah. And we're talking a lot about practice, and your book is filled with really wonderful actual practices. So I'm curious if, for us and our listeners, if we could have you guide a little practice that people can play with and have a more experiential relationship to this material.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. And when you suggested this, a particular practice came to mind, which is very simple, and it's kind of a combination of concentration meditation practice with heart awakening and embodiment practices. So of course I could describe it, or I could actually guide us through it. So let's find a comfortable position. Always an interesting part of any meditation instruction. If we haven't been sitting in a comfortable position, it can be interesting to note where we have been perpetuating our discomfort. And in this finding a comfortable position, in this finding where we are right now, I encourage you to have a bit of a look around the body. So bringing awareness to where the thighs and the knees and maybe the ankles, the balls of your feet are in contact with the chair or the floor, and noting how gravity is at play, this thing we call gravity, whereby the leg is not floating off the floor. Just noting that experience of being rooted. It might be you can even allow that experience of being rooted more fully. It might be you can relax a little or let go a little and just sink into that gravitational pull a little more wholeheartedly, a little more readily. with a little less resistance. Maybe just exploring what that's like to drop or to sink into this seated position right now. And as consciousness moves around the body, perhaps from this ache to that sensation, to that slight pain, to that slight pleasure, just noticing all these different types of experience, allowing them to be as they are, whether they are pleasant or unpleasant. And I invite your curiosity to center into the core of the physical body, into the heart center, into that space in the middle of our chest, in the core of our body. And simply bringing that curiosity, how is it to feel being you right now? How is the heart center right now? Again, noticing how the mind might treat some of those sensations and experiences more favorably than others, and see if it's possible to just note and be with each sensation, contraction, or expansion. And notice how breathing is right now. How is the breath? Whether long or short, just noticing as it is. Whether it's the rise and fall of the chest or the movement of air on the upper lip. And I invite you to bring that breath to the heart center. And what I mean by that, imagine as if you had a mouth or a nose in the center of your chest. And simply allow yourself to experience the inhalation and the exhalation at this core of your physical and emotional and mental and subtle bodies. If there are strong sensations, I can simply breathe into those strong sensations. I invite you to trust whatever spirit presents in this moment as being in need of a conscious breath or few. And so the invitation in that is to introduce the sensation, introduce the heart center to the breath in whatever way feels accessible and easy for you in this moment. And for a few breaths, I invite you to simply savor and enjoy this experience of breathing into the center of our chest. Noticing how it is to inhale and exhale from the heart center. Welcoming all qualities of sensation, whether pleasant or unpleasant. painful or pleasurable. And if there's resistance to sensation, then simply breathing into that too. Allowing this breathing to be absorbed and felt in the heart center, and to be an ongoing reunion, an ongoing bringing together of the heart center and the breath. And on this next inhalation, I invite you to add a little something into this experience. Add the quality of love. Whether this be most readily accessed as the word love, or as a symbol, or as a vibration, or as a color, perhaps, pink or green or golden light. Whichever is most readily available to your consciousness in this moment. And see how it is to receive love as breath into the heart. Noticing how easy or how challenging or how difficult this might be. And remembering that however easy or difficult we find this practice has no meaning whatsoever. Our experience is entirely innocent. And I invite you to see if it's possible to more fully or more readily absorb or receive breath. Seeing if it's possible to open more fully or to breathe in more deeply this loving breath. And on the next exhalation, I invite you to add a simple thank you. So on the inhalation, we're playing with exploring what it is to breathe in love, and modulating, playing with how much love we can absorb. Is it possible to adjust the dial? And on the out breath, we express thanks. Again, that could be the word or the words thank you. It could be that we most easily access visual phenomena, green light, pink light, golden light. Or it might be that feeling, that vibrational expression of gratitude is right there, and we access that. So let's just savor these next few breaths. Nothing to do, simply this invitation to enjoy breath as love, and to consciously acknowledge that breath as love, and to appreciate the receiving of this love into my heart. And like any practice, of course, this can be stretched out into lengthy sessions, and it can be a powerful pause as well if we're going about our day. Perhaps we're finding ourselves in a tense conversation, or maybe distracted by our office environment or a news item that we've seen. And this very simple practice of connecting with breath, absorbing breath fully, and acknowledging an aspect of breath, which is love. And in that acknowledgement and in that receiving, from that open-heartedness, expressing thanks, simply because we can, not because we should, not because we must, but because we can. Breathing in love, breathing out gratitude. And in your own way, in your own time, I invite you to rejoin the podcast, the dialogue.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Will.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the idea. That was a nice touch.
Yeah. Well, it was almost like a bonus in Brooke and mine's day. We just got a little extra meditation worked in. And I know you have a lot of practices in the book, some of them journaling, some of them meditation. People can check them out. And you've recorded them on audio, so that's really great for people. I know you're doing 60 minutes of meditation practice a day. Do you do a personal practice that looks something like this?
I'm back. So my life has been. I'm usually just finishing or starting a practice period, whether it be the first one was 28 days of no alcohol and meditating every day when I was 21. I've currently just begun literally today I'm beginning a 100-day practice. So in Zen we have 100 days or year or 3 year. I did think to make it 1,000 days this morning, but I thought let's get to day 2 or 3 before
you add a zero.
Yeah, like you can see the ego just wanting to jump in there and make it more complicated. And the practice for me right now actually looks like 2-hour sits. I haven't done that for a long time. But as a way of secular at-home practice, topping and tailing the day with an hour each end is effective. And I'm journaling again, so that creates the possibility for the gratitude practice to be much as we would be familiar with, journaling what I'm appreciative of and so on. What gratitude generally looks like more as a practice for me is a regular interrupter, and just as an enjoyable. It's not. Well, I guess I still do practice it. But I guess what I do notice, and I'm sure anyone that's had a meditation practice for any sustained period of time will notice how their practice starts to seep into everyday life. And we start off, we're trying to sort of squeeze all our stress and dysfunction into that half hour of meditation or whatever, and hope that somehow by the end of it we're suffering less, or at least after a week of it perhaps. It feels that as time unfolds, something different starts to happen, and we start to notice that time that we were giving, that investment that we were making, is now starting to yield returns. And I love this idea. I like the taking of economic language and talking about how any act of kindness or meditation or yogic session or any little spiritual throwing of a pebble into the canyon, as it were, it is an investment, and it is a seed that will yield fruit. The only question is when. And so, yeah, I'm very fortunate that I get to benefit from some of the yields of prior investments, and that's a real powerful context for me right now to be in. Yeah, cool. Let's just really double down for 100 days, and invest, because I do also know that when I'm in that degree of devotion and clarity and simplicity, a lot of remarkable, magical things happen in my life. I just saw two of my friends. I started a retreat called "How to Make Yourself Grace Prone." Don and Patty at the Wellbeing Center in Tazwell. If any of our listeners are happening to be in the area, they're two beautiful souls. And I feel that if anything, this is the ultimate knock-on effect of gratitude as a practice. We become very grace prone because we're looking out for those moments of insight. We're looking out for those moments of beauty. And hopefully our practice is strong enough that we can, in that moment, absorb and open and receive.
And it can be a challenging thing for people, for whatever reason, to get into a meditation practice or even a cognitive mental practice of interrupting their thoughts with gratitude. But the thing about this practice is it just feels so good. This isn't really hardship. To sit and breathe and be in your heart and let in that natural flow of love and of thank you. It feels so good. So even if someone is starting with 5 or 10 or 15 minutes or 20 minutes, which you will see a result from, right? I mean, that's been proven. Longer, maybe even better to become more grace prone, but why not start where you can? I mean, this isn't hardship. This is a delight. It's a wonderful way to use your time and precious energy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the inescapable. I've never met anyone who practiced gratitude sincerely and with all their effort and been disappointed.
What a drag. I hate feeling
it ruined my life.
Yeah. Like now I have nothing to complain about. I'm generally feeling equanimous, and I'm kind in my relationships. Like it's really screwed up my life.
I experience more pleasure. It's such a bummer.
And I have this really terrible thing that happens as I'm walking around, on my way to work, and suddenly I'll just notice how astonishingly beautiful this experience of reality is. And I have to stop listening to the news. It's very inconvenient. And really to get that taste. So as we've got a nice little takeaway there with the meditation, the 3 things in the morning and 3 things at night is a very accessible, easy practice that will yield results in feeling good in a short period of time. And the other is to sit down for an hour or 45 minutes, get an A4 paper and just write and write and write. I'm grateful for and feeling grateful for. So writing present tense, what I am feeling grateful for, and see where that takes you. Because most people, not to spoil it completely, but most people think they have about 5 or 10 things to be grateful for. Because that's like how we expanded the bandwidth. Right? Like, my parents, my family. Yeah, I'm kind of happy I live in England rather than the US. Sorry, I couldn't resist it.
That's fair point.
Less so now that we've got the Don visiting us right now. I believe he's regaling the Queen with some charming story of his own narcissism. And what we discover in the sustaining of the practice is, oh golly, there are literally thousands of things for which I feel genuine and sincere appreciation. And so just as enlightenment has no limits, is a never-ending unfolding, paradoxically, right? Somehow this being becomes more, or this nothingness becomes something. It's like, it doesn't make any sense, but that's the experience. There's always this ongoing expansion, and it seems that we can have that same experience with gratitude as a practice. Just as emptiness can become more empty, as it were, or so it might seem, we can discover just how good we can feel. You use the word like wonderful and delight and awesome, and marvelous, like the literal etymology of all these words, like the truth of the marvel and the wonder and the awe of an awake consciousness. It's just absolutely stunning.
It expands and expands in my experience, and then at some point there's a tipping point, and not that this stays with me all the time, but I get to have experiences of being tremendously grateful for even the things that before I would have labeled really, horrific, actually. Not grateful in the sense that I would wish it on myself or anyone else again, but just really can see the love in those things too. Right. And that there's the experience, and not the Hallmark card, but the actual experience that things really are woven of love, and that we can train our awareness to pick up on that and to be receptive towards it.
Yeah, I mean that's it, and there's so much in that, right? That we can, as a human being, discover the direct experience of the presence of love, even in the most fearful moments. And of course, ultimately, one measure of a life well lived is a peaceful death. And again, like we all have that experience at some point. We don't know when. And so putting in the practice now, today, in our gratitude, in our exercise, in our meditation, is making it all the more likely that in that moment of passing, I mean, I know what my last words, I hope, will be. Thank you, just like, wow, what a life that was, what a trip. And people talk about how Mahatma Gandhi it was no coincidence or no act of chance that when he died, the words that were coming out of his mouth were Rama, 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 because he had been practicing the remembrance of God, of course, his entire life, such that when that moment occurred, no problem. And that's the deal, I think. We do need to invest, we do need to practice, such that when we're in those moments of stress or challenge, we're able to access the gratitude or the love or the equanimity.
Well, thank you, Will. Thank you for your work and for talking with us. Again, really appreciate it.
That was very fun. You always make me laugh, and you give me something new to think about each time.
Great. Well, thank you for all you guys are doing at Bliss and Grit. I really appreciate it, and have a wonderful yesterday, wherever you are in the US. I think it's still today. I'm getting confused.
We're close. Yeah.